Hi students, these are video vocab notes for 31.2, War in Europe. Remembering World War I and Germany having its energy divided between the Western and Eastern fronts, Hitler looks first to the West. His plan is very much like the World War I Schlieffen Plan. He plans to use Blitzkrieg, a German phrase meaning lightning war. He initially takes Poland, and then according to the terms of the Nazi-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact, Stalin mobilizes and secures the Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, and also Finland. Remember, these were the states that were created in the Treaty of Versailles at the end of World War I to serve as a cordon sanitaire, a buffer zone between the communist Soviet Union and the rest of Western Europe. Once he secures his sort of eastern wall by securing Poland and making peace with Stalin, Hitler then invades and secures access to Denmark and Norway. On the map, these are the two states that sort of guard the entrance to the Baltic Sea. The Strait of Jutland is the waterway between them, and by controlling both of those nations, not only does Hitler maintain a good supply of iron ore for his war machine, but he also keeps the Baltic open. His navy now can come and go freely from the Baltic into the North Atlantic. Here's his big move. With the Eastern Front secure and the Baltic waterways open, Hitler turns all of his attention to the West. He invades France in much the same way that the Schlieffen Plan indicated in World War I. He slips around the French frontier, around the Maginot Line of defenses, and invades France through Belgium. Unlike World War I, however, this time the German invasion is successful. Hitler's fast-moving Blitzkrieg lightning war gets very quickly to Paris, seizes control of the French government, and sets up what is called the Vichy French government. It's a puppet government. Basically, the Germans take control of northern and eastern France. They leave southern and western France so-called independent with a new capital in the city of Vichy. However, that government answers only to the Germans. It does what the German state tells it to. The Vichy French government is not a truly independent state. So part of France is under direct rule. Part of it is now this puppet government known as Vichy France. When France and Belgium fall to Hitler's Blitzkrieg advance, the British soldiers who are still in Europe helping the defense are evacuated quite excitingly, quite miraculously, from the city of Dunkirk on the English Channel. They're evacuated not by military ships, but by every British ship that floats, fishing boats, pleasure cruisers. Basically, anyone with a boat runs across the English Channel and grabs as many British soldiers as they can to keep them out of German prisons. At this point, Neville Chamberlain, remember the notoriously unpopular British Prime Minister whose policy of appeasement had sort of let Hitler run unchecked across Europe, he's replaced as Prime Minister by the man you probably associate with World War II, Winston Churchill. You probably remember Churchill from World War I when he was the head of the Navy and designed the sort of disastrous and unsuccessful invasion at Gallipoli. Britain then becomes the main opposition to German expansion. They've defeated Belgium and France. Spain is fascist. Italy is on Germany's side in the Rome-Berlin axis. And Stalin has been sort of kept happy with his own expansion in Eastern Europe. Britain is really the last holdout against German expansion. And so Hitler decides that rather than try to take on the British at sea, where they are powerful, or try to orchestrate an invasion of an island nation, which is extremely difficult, Hitler decides to strike Britain initially in an air war. The Battle of Britain is the name given to Hitler's attempt to destroy both the air power of Britain and the ground defensive resources. That could be everything from anti-aircraft guns to radar stations along the coastline of southern Britain, the English Channel coast of Britain. However, the resistance that the British are able to put up, the Royal Air Force, and especially the radar that allows them to see German attacks coming, is very effective. The Battle of Britain is pretty evenly matched, and it is ultimately very costly to both the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, and the British air power, the RAF, the Royal Air Force. Neither power is able to gain the upper hand in the Battle of Britain. So Adolf Hitler switches his focus. Instead of attacking air and ground defenses, he instead attacks the people of Britain. He starts these night bombing campaigns in London, which becomes known as the Blitz. His hope is to demoralize and discourage the British people. The attacks are devastating. Many people are killed. Lots of devastation to the infrastructure, buildings destroyed, homes burned out and bombed out. But ultimately, the impact on civilians and the devastation in London does not break British morale, and it does not lead to German air superiority. The British proved to be a pretty gritty bunch, a pretty tough bunch, and you may be familiar with the meme, keep calm and do something constructive. The original poster was a British wartime poster urging its citizens to keep calm and carry on during these almost nightly air raids. The photo you see there on the right are people who have had to leave their homes on the surface streets of London and retreat into the subways, where many people live night after night, sleeping literally between the subway rails, while the Germans bombed the city of London above. At this point, we start to see the Americans trying to define their role in this conflict. Again, World War I is very fresh in everyone's memory. Anyone who is in a position of government power at this point had been a young person, and in many cases a soldier, in the First World War. Not wanting to return to another world war, the United States tries to maintain a policy of isolationism. That is, stick to the Western Hemisphere, stay out of European political and military conflicts, just sort of staying uninvolved. However, FDR, the American president, did lead the American government to support the British war effort. Roosevelt first starts with a cash and carry policy, which basically says that we will sell military goods, war materials, to the British as long as they pay for them. At this point, the Americans sort of take the position of, we're just merchants, we're just in business here, we've got goods for sale, and they've got cash to buy them, so we're not really picking a side. We're just in business here. Later, though, Roosevelt switches to a policy called Lend-Lease, in which we actually loan the war materials on extended credit with an agreement that the British will pay America back for those war materials at some later date. So that when Roosevelt switches from cash and carry to Lend-Lease, it really does represent the Americans picking more of a side in the war. The war at this point also spreads to Eastern Europe and Africa. Remember that Mussolini had successfully invaded Ethiopia and already had colonies in Libya and Italian Somaliland. Mussolini expands now by military force, but he runs into British forces from the British colonies in Africa, notably British troops from Egypt. So Mussolini struggles to expand Axis control of North Africa. The Germans do, however, expand across the Balkan Peninsula by reaching their, kind of projecting force all the way down the Balkans into the Mediterranean. They can support the Italians in North Africa. However, having already started a war in the West, being busy with the fight against Britain, the air fight against Britain, and always wary of Stalin's Soviet Union in the east, the Germans aren't too excited about having to split their energy to support their Italian allies in North Africa. At this point, World War II is underway. The United States has not yet joined, but all of Europe is at war, and the war has spread, as you can see, into Eastern Europe and into Africa.